Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the SKNIS Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to InFocus, a weekly program where we zoom in on what's happening within and throughout the government, your government. The OECS is 42 and CARICOM turns 50. There is much to celebrate, say local and regional officials and some in the international circles. But has the regional integration movement really benefited the man in Bastille or the woman in Charlestown? Joining us to share his insight is His Excellency Larry Vaughan, Ambassador and Head of the Regional Diaspora Unit for the government, as well as Ambassador to the Caribbean Community, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and the Association of Caribbean States. Stay with us as we delve into your government, your business.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Welcome back to InFocus. Thank you for staying with us, and we apologize for the late start, but allow me and join me in welcoming the Ambassador, His Excellency Larry Vaughan. Ambassador, good to have you on our program. Welcome.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and I'm happy to be here. It's my first experience on InFocus, so thank you for the invitation.
We mentioned that you are the head of the Regional Integration Diaspora Unit. We call it REDU for short, as most persons do. What essentially does your responsibility include?
Well, REDU is twofold. First, we deal with the regional integration. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis has, over the years, been a signatory to a number of regional agreements. The Treaty of Bastille, dealing with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which deals with CARICOM, and there's also an agreement to form the Association of Caribbean States. These regional agreements bring with us certain obligations, certain aspirations and desires of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so the government has created a unit that will seek to make sure that we are compliant, that we are implementing a number of the programs we are desirous of and are obligated to. And so there is the regional integration aspect. Then there's a diaspora unit where St. Kitts and Nevis is blessed to have so many of our nationals living abroad. And we need to have a unit to incorporate them into the national agenda of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so there is the diaspora unit. And so the government has merged these two aspects together and called it REDU, the Regional Integration and Diaspora Unit. And so what we are doing is just to make sure that St. Kitts and Nevis is up to the game of making sure we are compliant, we are implementing well when it comes to our regional obligations, and that we are enabling our nationals abroad to be part of the national dialogue and discourse through the diaspora unit.
Now, I know that there would be a new impetus essentially in terms of engaging the diaspora. How has that been working? How has the feedback been? Like, are persons willing to get on board?
Yes, the nationals abroad are just elated on it. And what we have done is that we have introduced the concept of a diaspora ambassador. And so Her Excellency Dr. Christine Walwyn is our ambassador to the diaspora, and she will be leading a number of initiatives. For example, quite shortly there will be the ANSA coming up in Anguilla. I think it's from the 14th or thereabout of July in Anguilla. And so the government will make sure that we are participating in ANSAR to make sure that our nationals living in the diaspora can collaborate and cooperate within a framework where the government is assisting and facilitating and making sure that our nationals are part of this local agenda while living and operating abroad.
And can you tell us what ANSAR is?
ANSAR is the Anguilla Nevis St. Kitts Associations Reunion. That organization has been meeting every 2 or 3 years. I could be quite incorrect with the timing, but every 2 to 3 years they meet and in a reunion so that they can discuss how the nationals abroad, the associations, can collaborate and work more strongly to assist the government and the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, because oftentimes through their collaborations they have been assistance for us here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Some have sought and received scholarships for our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis, disaster relief after storms, and the nationals abroad have been working. And it is because of their collaboration and working together. It is now for the government now to be a part of that dialogue, be a part of that planning, and be a part of that execution so that our nationals living abroad, can be part of the national discourse.
And Ambassador, let's switch gears a bit to your other duties. As mentioned earlier, you are the ambassador to CARICOM, to the OECS, and also to the ACS. Tell us about how you are able to maintain your duties and your responsibilities to these 3 different organizations.
The organizations each have secretariats. The OECS has been quite novel in their approach. They call theirs the Commission. But these organizations, their standard secretariats, I'll call them for want of a unifying word, they are quite efficient in their organization, in their dissemination of information. And so the redo is staffed at this point with an assistant secretary who would assist me in being able to schedule meetings, work on collaborating with the different ministries and units who are the focal points in different areas. Like, for example, under CARICOM, there are some committees like COTED, which is the Council on Trade and Economic Development. The contact point there would be the Ministry of International Trade. So we'll collaborate with Ministry of Trade on those matters to make sure we are implementing the trade matters effectively. There is COSHAD, which deals with social matters, for example, education, health, and so we'll collaborate with the Ministry of Health and with the Ministry of Social Development and also with the Ministry of Education to deal with matters that COSHAD would be dealing with. And so we work together, and COFCORD is another organization in CARICOM. We do that as well. For OECS, there is the Tourism Ministers Council. So that committee meets, and so we will coordinate with the Ministry of Tourism to make sure that we are represented at meetings, and whatever decisions have been taken would be now better implemented for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. So it's really a lot of work. However, it becomes simple once you are able to coordinate it. And you're just giving oversight and facilitating where it is necessary. But our government has been quite efficient in a number of the areas it has been working. And so our role is just to facilitate in making sure that information is received on a timely basis between OECS or CARICOM or ACS and St. Kitts and Nevis, and in our responses and our showing that we are really doing our part within the regional integration efforts.
No, during your interaction with these organizations, I'm sure that there are some overlapping issues that you're able to take the experience from one and take to the other. Tell us a bit about that.
There are some where we are cooperating. I wouldn't call it duplicating efforts. I would say that we are cooperating at different levels. For example, it could be on, and let me use the example of global warming and all these efforts. You would find that the buzzword right now is the Bridgetown Initiative, where Prime Minister Motley has been pioneering the work of the region to make sure that we benefit from our interaction.
And that's a CARICOM initiative?
It's a Barbados initiative,
okay,
which has come into CARICOM, has been shaped by the work in the OECS, and influences what happens in the Greater Caribbean and the ACS. So you can go to all three meetings and hear of the Bridgetown Initiative, because we are looking at strongly echoing that sentiment that the Caribbean region is serious about sustainability. It is serious about making sure that we cover a lot that is happening. Now, there are other aspects where there are different objectives. Like, for example, free movement of people between the OECS and free movement of people within CARICOM. Totally different focus. For example, in CARICOM, the focus is on the skill sets of the people. And so the skill certificates in 13 key areas would determine who can move freely between the different member states of CARICOM. But of the OECS, once you are born, you have that. Once you're a citizen, you have that right to move freely. It is not yet available in CARICOM, but the OECS has determined to deepen the integration process even greater than CARICOM has. So it's not now that we are duplicating efforts, there are different focus in the very same work that is being done in both areas.
And of course, I've heard it said that the OAS is a bit more nimble because it is smaller in terms of the membership, and that is something that we'd like to delve in a bit more in terms of the OACS and its programming, but we can do so on the other side of this break. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with more In Focus. Thanks for staying with us. We continue our conversation with Ambassador Larry Vaughan. We want to talk a bit about the OECS, as we mentioned, and let me just, for the benefit of those who may not be aware, share in terms of the member states. And of course, there are some associate member states as well. There would be Antigua, Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Those are the full member states within the OECS. And the associate members are Anguilla, the British Virgin Islands, Martinique, and Guadeloupe. Now, you would have hinted at it earlier in terms of, for instance, the free movement, some of the benefits that we enjoy of being a part of this organization. But what would you say has been, since you have taken the role, has been the most impactful thing that you see that would ordinarily, or benefit the ordinary man here on St. Kitts and Nevis and the streets?
We share a common history. I've understood it that we all came from the same place in Africa, only thing we were dropped off on different islands. And so as we go forward, having that common history, I could quote my national anthem and say, to posterity extend that common destiny. And so what the OECS has done for us is to say, the boundaries of water must now become what unites us. So we are often now looking at the blue economy as not just our boundaries, but areas of shared cooperation. So what does that mean? It means that our programs will be able to further improve how we care for our marine resource, how we can share that marine resource so that it benefits us in the area of tourism, food production, and other areas of recreation and enjoyment. It also means that the ongoing thrust to improve transportation among us would be able to get us to move more nimbly between the member states so that one doesn't need, as it were, to produce a passport when one travels from one member state to the next. One doesn't need to worry about getting back to their member state if they are working in another member state and need to claim for Social Security and other social programs that help to benefit the people. And so the OECS as an organization looks towards having that deeper level of integration that is not yet being available in the broader context of CARICOM.
Where do you think that is?
Well, you hinted to it earlier because of size. In CARICOM, we use two antiquated terms, and I call them antiquated because I think they have gone out with, they've gone out a very long time ago, lesser developed and more developed. And the less developed and the more developed. But when you look at the OECS, these are the territories that have been considered to be less developed. And so contextually, we are similar. We don't have the broader issues that the greater or the much developed or the more developed among us would be considered to have. And so, for example, the free movement between countries of 30,000 or 50,000, 80,000 will be much different to that free movement between 1.2 million, 800,000, and 50,000. So that level of commonality is what unites the OECS much more deeply at this time than CARICOM. And so not that CARICOM is at a disadvantage, but the struggles are greater. And we are willing to pursue each of them, whether as OECS or as CARICOM. And so the strategies for St. Kitts and Nevis must be compatible or engaging in such a way that it helps us to meet the obligations of each of these organizations.
Now, the OECS earlier this month celebrated its 42nd anniversary, and much of the activities were held here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Tell us a bit about why that was done.
Each year, the OECS meets on the 18th of June, the anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Bastia, which was done so here in Bastia in 1981. Leading up to that anniversary each year, the Commission would travel to the hosting member country, and it is done rotationally in alphabetical order. So the last to have the meeting before us was Montserrat, and then it's expected that St. Lucia, as you listed them in order, would follow on to host. St. Kitts and Nevis then would have hosted the heads meeting, which we call the OECS Authority. And so the Commission came to St. Kitts and Nevis in preparation, and in that preparation, some events were held. We had OECS in the classroom, where we met with the children in the primary schools. We had a panel discussion on ZIZ TV on the Thursday evening of that week. We had a fun walk on the Saturday, and there was a flag-raising ceremony. These activities were all part. One of the major events that did not happen in St. Kitts and Nevis would have been a church service on the following Sunday after the meeting here in St. Kitts. That was held in St. Lucia. But the main events would have taken place in the host country so that the nationals could be part of the awareness, a part of the celebration, because OECS works for everyone. And so that was the glory, the joy of having been given the chair of the authority at the time of the celebration.
Before we speak about the chair of the authority, I want you to go back because you just mentioned the visits, OECS in the classroom, the visits to schools across St. Kitts and Nevis. Talk to us a bit about the engagement that you had with the students. Or what was that like? Do they really understand what OECS is?
The children know OECS better than you and I. I'm happy to say that. And it tells me that regional integration is alive and well in St. Kitts and Nevis, and it is in good hands. It is in good minds, in good heads with our young people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. They understand what is the free movement and what are its benefits. They are able to articulate why they too would want to be part of it. Those who want to have businesses in the future and be small business owners and entrepreneurs, they understand that now they move beyond the market of 50,000 in St. Kitts and Nevis to over 650,000 when you look at the countries that make up the OECS. They understand that they are free to move from one island to the next to seek greater opportunities, and the restrictions do not exist. And so the children were able to speak about it, and they are even proud of the understanding that it all began here in Bastia. And so we were happy to have been at the different schools, and I want to thank the Ministry of Education. I think, what's his name, the Chief Education Officer, Francil Morris, and the Principal Education Officer in Nevis, Ms. Zanella Claxton, they have been quite accommodative. They have opened their schools to us, and they've said to us, we are happy you've come. It is a time when the children are preparing for exams, but they were able to give us that 45 minutes to an hour each school to go in and have that talk with the children, and we are so happy, we are proud, and we are so grateful.
Now, Ambassador, as we discuss the engagement with children, there's also a project that the OECS is implementing here in St. Kitts and Nevis. It's called Oasis.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Oasis is not just in St. Kitts and Nevis. There was a launch of it here in St. Kitts and Nevis on account that it is the follow-up to a justice project that the OECS would have engaged in with USAID. The program of Oasis seeks to put into better context and to better bring into fruition the plans for justice reform for our youth. And so it was brought to St. Kitts and Nevis, the Oasis aspect, that is, at the time of the lead up to the heads meeting. And so the Director General, Dr. Didiscus Jules, was here. He spoke to it. He got the information out to our people that it is alive and well in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that there is the desire to help reduce crime and violence and let the young people know that there is, or will always be, an alternative to crime, and that even when they have run afoul of the law, that reform system sees something good in them so that they can be reformed, and that recidivism is brought to a very low state, and that we can progress as a society with less crime, or probably no crime, where that is possible.
And the fact that, as you mentioned, the OECS member states, so many of the realities are similar.
Yes.
Because we're all similar countries. That certainly helps to make the project a bit more impactful.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. One finds that the territories like St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, and others who have implemented it, they are able to chart new ways, because at the end of the day, we are strongest because of our human resource, and we can leave none behind in our development agenda. We can't just decide that we will chart a way forward to prosperity, but there are some that we can leave out. And so this system of Oasis and the justice reform system, which it now replaces, the desire is to use this as a part of social development that will lift all, including those who would have at some point in their youthful indiscretion, would have fallen afoul of the law.
Let's talk a bit about the commission meeting that you mentioned was held also here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Now,
The authority meeting.
Right, the authority meeting. Now, of course, we would have seen some pictures of it, and the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, that is, he would have assumed the head of the commission for the next 12 months. Essentially, what does that mean?
It means that as the head of the authority, he is able to guide the work program of the OECS over the next 12 months. The authority is the highest decision-making body in the OECS. And so where all the other committees and all the other organs would have done their work, all that work is now brought to the authority for ratification, for discussion, and for a decision before implementation. And so Dr. Drew's role from the 18th of June is then to guide the OECS over the next 12 months to determine what are the areas of priorities we should work on to make sure that we are progressive in the work of the OECS. Because oftentimes people believe that the OECS, CARICOM, and maybe the ACS are just talk shops. They really bring no practical value to the people. And so Dr. Drew laid out what I would politely call a manifesto. He listed 5 key areas where he would want to pursue advancement and change in the OECS over the next 12 months.
Can you briefly tell us what those 5 areas were?
I can, off the top of my head, hopefully. One would be a reduction in crime. And he also looked at the environmental aspects. He also looked at health, which is I think it's his baby. So he wanted to look at health, and he has advanced the idea that he would love to have centers of excellence in each of the member states, that we can look at advancing health in specialist areas, perhaps in oncology in one island state, heart, brain, and so that as a united Caribbean, we can, OECS that is, we can now work towards advancing these. And so he really did lay out a comprehensive plan, and it is now the role of the Commission, wherein I would work as the Commissioner, to make sure that these things are done effectively over the next 12 months.
So you mentioned crime and violence, health, and the other was the climate change, essentially,
climate change,
right?
yes.
What about the other 2?
I was, off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember what the other 2 are. Forgive me. But I'll come back to them. They'll come back to me.
Okay, Ambassador, so what we'll do as we focus on the other aspect of your responsibilities now will be CARICOM.
Yes.
So we are going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we'll get into the discussion about the CARICOM and its role, which, as you mentioned, is similar to OECS in extent, but of course it has a much more broader theme, and of course they'll be celebrating 50 years, so we want to talk about that. We'll be right back with more in Focus. Welcome back to InFocus. We'll continue our discussion with Ambassador Larry Vaughan. Ambassador, talk to us about CARICOM. It turns 50 later this year. How symbolic is that?
It's symbolic because 50 years is older than I am. And it tells me that as a region, we have stick-to-itiveness power. We are able, once we pursue something, we can get there once we make the commitment. I have heard as a child some people call it CARICOM and CARIGON, but CARICOM is still around. It is working with focused vision on what is happening. And so on Tuesday, the 4th of July, and it is quite interesting that many people see that date as more geared towards a celebration in the United States of America. However, it was also on that date in 1973 that 4 of our then leaders got together and formed CARICOM. And so the date is not just for the United States. It is a date that we as a region, that we can celebrate, because when people thought that the Federation had collapsed in 1962, that there was nothing left for us as a region to coalesce around and to build on, CARICOM came in 1973. And 50 years later, we are able to speak of advancements we have made as a region as a result of the collaboration of our countries and the joint arrangements we have made. Unfortunately, have we achieved all that we've set out to achieve? No. But have we done well on account of it? Definitely yes. And so I'm proud to look at the theme of CARICOM's 50th celebration, that it's 50 years strong, a solid foundation to build on. Because the vision now is not what has happened over the last 50 years. It is to use these last 50 years as the foundation to build a greater Caribbean community. And so I want to, as my part as commissioner, ambassador for the OEC, for CARICOM, that I am able to bring great awareness to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. I am able to bring greater benefits and help them to see where the benefits are as business people, as citizens, as nationals, so that at the end of the day, we are enriched, whether financially, socially, even individually and mentally, that we are done so because of the greater collaboration we have with our member states in Guyana, Suriname, Haiti, all our nationals across the region, that we can have a stronger Caribbean as a result of CARICOM.
And how is St. Kitts and Nevis celebrating? I know the day has been declared a public holiday here.
Yes.
How are we celebrating?
We are celebrating over the year. We want to start from July the 4th to July the 4th, 2024. There will be a series of events. Some will be large, some will be more contemplative, others will be, or each will make sure that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis are more aware of what CARICOM is about. And so the holiday in 2023, I want to make sure, and I think I need to find the camera and say it, right now it is only July the 4th, 2023. It has not been given for July the 4th in posterity, maybe yet. But however, just make sure that we have the understanding it is only for July the 4th, 2023, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary. Going thereafter, or on the day, we want to have a food fair. The details are to be announced shortly. And we want to also have the presence of St. Kitts and Nevis in Trinidad, because CARICOM 50 will be celebrating with a concert in Trinidad, and there should be, we are trying to finalize that as well, representation from St. Kitts and Nevis on that concert. Here at home, we want to have a display at the National Museum. That will be done sometime later. We want to have a church service as well to be thankful for that celebration. We consider that that may come at the very end of the 50 years of celebration. We also are looking at having some lectures, public lectures, in collaboration with the University of the West Indies local chapter, because the UWI is a part of the CARICOM story. And so we want to bring all this to have that discussion of the 50 years. We are looking at what is the role of perhaps Robert Bradshaw, because while it was 1973 that CARICOM was started, St. Kitts, Nevis, and Anguilla as a associate state joined CARICOM 1 year later. So by July the 4th, 2024, St. Kitts and Nevis will be celebrating 50 years as a member of the Caribbean community. So the celebration is going to be over sometime. In November, we are looking at having that Youth Month being celebrated as with CARICOM and the youth, because each 2 years, I think it is, of 2 year cycle, we have CARICOM Youth Ambassadors. And so we want our CARICOM Youth Ambassadors, Mr. Munzak, and I'm trying to remember the young lady's name now. There's a second CARICOM Youth Ambassador, but we want their role to be highlighted to the young people as well, to let them know that CARICOM works for all. It is not just that antiquated group of old men and powerful men who sit aside and make decisions, but how it affects each and every one of us, including our youth.
Now, of course, as you refer to Trinidad, where there will be a concert, there also was a symposium that was held recently in terms of considering crime and violence as a public health issue. How would you say St. Kitts and Nevis would have benefited from participating in that meeting?
That meeting was the brainchild of Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley. I only understood at that symposium that local physician, Dr. Isben Williams, was a college roommate of Dr. Rowley. And so that dialogue between those two gentlemen over the years have helped to shape the context that crime is not just a social issue as a result, let me shape this, that it is not just a precursor to health matters. So your hospitals are overrun with people who need treatment after being shot, stabbed, or whatever. But there is a health component that even precedes that. Because there was a gentleman from Bahamas who spoke, a doctor, who said that he had interviewed some young men after they had committed their first offense, perhaps a murder. And some of them vomited up their stomach to the point that they were nauseated as a result of what they had perpetrated. Yet, after having repeated it time and time again, it became as normal as drinking water. And it means that something in their psyche must have shifted. That becomes an aspect of mental health that needs to be treated and to be understood, so you can have them not see crime as being normal. And so it was a pleasure to see Dr. Drew, as Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, look at that and said, how can we then not look at crime as just that there are some people who, they're just bad, and we just need to lock them up for as long as we can, and if we can't lock them up any longer, then we find a death penalty that we could deal with them. Or we must then use this new focus that crime is a mental health issue. It is a health issue. And how can we then have that understanding that we can treat the health issue so that we can lessen the crime? And so it is an outlook that we can benefit from here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I was happy that it is the brainchild of one of our locals, Dr. Isben Williams, in collaboration with Dr. Keith Rowley. I was happy that many of the regional heads traveled to Trinidad and was part of the dialogue and there's expected to be ongoing work with it. And as the ambassador for St. Kitts and Nevis to CARICOM, it would be my role to ensure that this work it takes root here in St. Kitts and Nevis, whether through our health ministry, our social development ministry, even finance, because it has to be financed to make sure that the policy takes root. And so my advocacy role, my role to make sure that it takes implementation through the redo, will also make sure that it benefits the people of St. Kitts and Nevis.
And of course, there will be a national initiative as such as the Prime Minister recently announced, and he will be the chair of that committee. Now, I want to part on this because we are essentially out of time for our program, given the late start. But the Prime Minister reported, because he's, of course, been to several regional meetings now, and we would have seen that, of course, after the COVID-19 pandemic, that, you know, there is the beginning, the opening up in terms of heads and ministerial meetings that is taking place. And the Prime Minister would have indicated that he would have received feedback from persons welcoming St. Kitts and Nevis back to international and regional fora. Have you gotten any sense of that persons missed the presence of St. Kitts and Nevis as such?
What I would say is that there are often different approaches to international relations. And sometimes you have to not be at the table for them to miss you. But do not stay away from the table too long, because as one Singaporean Deputy Prime Minister put it in his book, you are either at the table or you're on the menu. And so what Dr. Drew has recognized is that regional integration is an integral part of local growth and development. And so he wants to be at the table. And so I want to look more at being now at the table than to lament our years of not being at the table. And I want to praise Dr. Drew for being able to see this as quite necessary and to put the machinery in place. I want to pledge my part that as the chief emissary of the Prime Minister on regional integration matters, that where he is unavailable and the foreign minister is unavailable to sit at the table, that I want to offer the best representation possible to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis benefits at this point and going forward.
Ambassador, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of InFocus.
Thank you very much.
And we encourage you, viewers and listeners, to join us next week at the same time. It is next place for the same place, that is, the same time, same place for our next edition of InFocus. I'm Ian Richards.
Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rush to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.